All right, so we're here today with Jed Stevens going over and recapping his top 10 mistakes made. So really excited to kind of get into this one. Brooke, how did you and Jed get connected?
Yeah, so Jed was one of our earliest partners. He was one of the first partners that signed up with us in the early years, and I loved his story. I'm sure I will let him tell it, but he was an engineer doing this part-time and came to us looking to grow and wanted to get out of his full-time engineering job. And yeah, it was kind of a fun story where, or maybe not so fun story, where COVID came in and hit, and we actually kind of went on pause for a couple months, and then he came back out and stepped on the gas and was able to grow his company. And I was lucky enough to go out and visit Jed out in Newport Beach, California, and visit him and his family. And even though his properties are out in Kauai now, and it was a good visit. But yeah, excited to have Jed on here because he's a longtime OG partner for sure.
Yeah, right on. Well, thanks, Jed. Welcome. Kind of glad to have you here with us today. Would love to hear the story. Also, there's a banana stand hat. I was told there was something about a banana. What's going on with the hat that Brooks got on today?
The banana stand, that's, if anybody's ever seen Arrested Development, there's that saying, there's always money in the banana stand. And so when Brooke came and we did our on-site, we were walking around and he walking down in Balboa Island, and he said, "What's with all the banana stands?" So I explained the whole thing, and then we had to stand in line. And I think, Brooke, didn't you have to talk the guy into selling you the hat, and he had to call and check with his manager because he wasn't allowed
I
to do
literally got, yeah, they didn't have any hats left. So I literally took a hat off the kid working behind the counter and ended up paying him $20 for his hat. So yeah, it was slightly used, but I think that kind of gives it a good story too.
That's called seasoned. It was seasoned.
Yeah. Brooks saying what he has to say to get a deal done. I'm not surprised. Yes. So it's very common. but yeah, Jed, no, it's great to hear kind of your background and how you got started. Maybe just an overview of kind of how you did get started might be useful. I love the kind of transition from, like you said, kind of part-time side hustle to this full-time thing. So you were back then, kind of where you were back then. Where are you today with the business and how things are growing with Koloakai?
Yeah, well, we started back in 2015. We actually got in the business to help some friends who were doing this kind of part-time, and they weren't, doing much in the way of compliance. So they got in trouble because they weren't licensed and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of came along and said, hey, we're really good at the compliance end, and you've already got all these contacts, you've got all the marketing set and everything like that. So we can help build the foundation and the structure of the business. And with your contacts, it'll make, a great merger. And so we went ahead and got licensed in Kauai. We got hooked up with a broker. We were just about ready to kick things off. And then our partner over there decided at the very last minute, I mean, no joke, we're driving home from the meeting with the broker, and they said, yeah, we're done. We don't want to do this. And so we've got this whole thing that we built, and now we've got to figure out how to all of a sudden get business. So not surprising that this trail of breadcrumbs leads to Vintory, but we spent 5 years building out the business operationally, getting it sound, getting it to the place where I could sleep at night 2,500 miles away without worrying that everything was going to just implode on the island. But after 5 years, we'd only been able to grow to 7 partners. And I sat down and looked at everything that we had in the business, the structure, all of the fundamental elements were there for growth. I just didn't have the skill set, the talents, whatever you want to call it. That wasn't my strength. So I saw Matt on a podcast, or I saw Brooke on a podcast with Matt Landau, and I thought, this guy's got all of the elements that I've identified that I'm deficient in. So I've got to go and talk to Vintory and see, kind of how they get this done and whether it's a good fit. And, that whole thing happened pretty soon. And you mentioned that Brooke will do anything to secure a sale. I think I'm one of the few people, at least early on, who called up sold, and he would have had to talk me out of it. So
nice.
Yeah.
Where does the business stand today, Jed, as far as inventory and your growth between both the markets in California and the markets in Kauai?
Yeah, so we're only operating in Kauai at the moment. We decided that it was just better to focus on one zone. When we started in 2020 with Brooke and Vintory, we had 7 properties, and now I believe we have 43. So we've set a pretty deliberate path. We haven't wanted to grow too fast in our market. Like I mentioned, being that far away, it's hard to want to try and grow too fast just because we'd have to be piling on things on top of things on top of things. And so I like to take it at a more reserved pace. But for us, we've hit almost exactly our marker, which is kind of 2 properties per month add until we get to a point where we want to be stable, probably around 60-ish or so.
Can you tell the story real quick, Jed, about, I love this part about how you were, full-time, engineer, and then but this was your passion, and your goal was to kind of get enough inventory where you could quit that job and do this full time. If you just
Yeah.
tell a little bit of that,
Yeah. I mean,
that'd be great.
like I said, so we started in 2015 and I was doing this part-time. I still had my job as a manager of a research and development group with a company doing, of all things, water control valves. So I'd had 15 years in R&D and research and development, and developed hundreds of products and things like that. Did market releases, true R&D, kind of everything in the middle. And once we started working with this, I realized that there was something a whole lot different between trying to develop a product for an industrial customer that kind of cares or doesn't care or whatever. We're just trying to figure out how to make the next widget so that we can sell that, as opposed to dealing with people on vacation and vacationers who are generally pretty happy, and getting to talk with people and working on managing homeowners assets that are really near and dear to their hearts. A lot of these people save up for years in order to be able to buy a house in Hawaii. So when they do that, they've got a lot of their emotion invested in it. And to be able to work with people like that and help people have great experiences in an amazing place like Hawaii was just something that, it spoke to me a lot more than the engineering side. Plus, by doing something on our own, I get to drive my own ship. We get to make our own decisions and choices, and we're limited by only what we want to do. And so when I talked earlier about having some sort of cap there, that's based on our lifestyle and how we want to live our life. And if we wanted to, we could probably grow quite a bit farther above that. But in reality, that's where we think we're going to hit our sweet spot, to where we can really operate the business and enjoy what we're doing, have a great life. I mentioned before we started, my kids just walked through the door. I'm here at the house, seeing my kids grow up and being a part of their lives. And for us, that's a really big, important driver behind what we're doing.
Right on. Well, maybe we'll turn the page a little bit and talk not about the bad things, but maybe about some of the mistakes, and that's kind of the thing that we're promoting here today,
Yeah.
that you made along the way, because you've got to this great place today, which is fantastic, and you're on this nice smooth trajectory. But I'm sure there was some turbulence, as there tends to be, between where you started and where you are today. Although a lot of wins too. So I'll go through kind of the list here that we have. We've got top 10 mistakes from Mr. Jed Stevens. So let's dive right in. Number one, not fully committing sooner to the process of building the business. Sat in the fence for years before we went all in, and that was when things finally started gaining momentum. I guess we touched on that a little bit, but anything extra to add on that mistake?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I realized, and this is part of why we also, decided to focus on Kauai specifically, was that you just can't go all in with 5 different things at the same time. If you're working a 9-to-5 job, you're giving a lot of your time and your effort and your energy there. And it took until I had decided, okay, I'm going to go all in and really focus on the vacation rentals, that all of the other things started happening. So for me, I look at kind of the 2 different phases of our business was pre-COVID and when I was still splitting my time between a 9-to-5 engineering job and doing this on the side, versus when I decided, no, this is going to be the whole thing that I do. And the returns that I've had since I've really fully committed have been just, it's like night and day. To me, it's a real clear line that as soon as I committed, we really got into it. So, looking back, I would have committed earlier if I'd known how valuable that commitment would be.
And Brooke, this came up a little bit with our Trover episode, didn't it? Where we talked about, doing 2 things at the same time, and, really it makes a lot more sense to have a single focus. Your thoughts on Jed's focus here?
Yeah, no, I mean, I love quotes, and Confucius says, "He who chases 2 rabbits catches none." So, yeah, there's something about shiny object disease that came up a ton in these things, but yeah, staying really, really focused and not chasing a whole bunch of different things, it really, really does help.
Right on. Well, let's head on over to the second one. I think this one will be relatable for a lot of folks listening in. So, number 2, being overeager to get our first properties and taking on owners that were not a good fit for the program. Always had issues and resulted in spending way too much time for too little return. So, the classic, bad apple. What was kind of your experience here, Jed? You don't have to say any names, but what was kind of your experience here, and what'd you learn from it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the early stages, when you're trying to get a foothold, to a certain extent, you got to do what you got to do. But as soon as you can move away from having to do that, it's really important to not sacrifice the amount of money you're willing to work for, not to have to deal with people who are going to treat your staff or you personally, if you're the one dealing with owners. Life's just too short for that. So if you're not going to have somebody who's respectful of the program, respectful of your people, and believes in the value that you bring, it's just not going to be the right property. And then you can look at that on the other side too. You might have a wonderful owner, but they just will not work with the property. At some point, you've got to realize that as much as I want this to work, you're better off not, and just saying, okay, this doesn't fit for us. We got to move on. not your problem, not my problem, but it is a problem. So we're just going to call it what it is and let it move on. I've heard other people say, fire fast and hire slow. That applies to owners and properties as
Yep.
well.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
This came up a few times, Brooke. Yeah.
We heard this time and time again across the board. And I was just as guilty of this. I mean, I was so goal oriented, and I had so much focus on hitting my numbers. I almost didn't care about the quality of the properties. And then, the first, one or two seasons, and then I realized all those problems were coming from a lot of those properties that we should have never brought on. Those are the pain points. So we pivoted pretty quickly, maybe by year 2, year 3, to realize that we want to really focus on like 5 different buildings, and, Ocean City is just a bunch of condo buildings for the most part. And we really focused on those 5 or 6 buildings that were higher end, newer, and it was just much easier to manage. Obviously, they're all in the same place. They were a little bit newer, so they usually had newer furniture, but it did take a little while to get there.
On that note, Jed, was there any like red flags, I guess, that you saw throughout the process where you're like, when the owner says XYZ or when the owner behaves in this way early on, I can tell that maybe it's going to be an issue that you could pass along? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that comes to how you're doing your marketing. So when I was doing it myself, I was focused on, what do I think owners want to hear? And this is before I learned an amazing amount of stuff that I've learned. But it was more about, what kind of incentives, what kind of discounts can I give? What kind of free stuff can I give away? And when I advertised that kind of thing, those are the people that I got, and they would call and want to talk about, let me see your fee structure. I want to talk to you about how my last manager is just doing all of these repairs that I don't believe are accurate. And it's just like, once you start hearing all that we're talking about with this owner is about finances and about how he's upset about that extra $5 charge, or this, being $5 more than he thinks is the right amount. That's a red flag for me, because I think, okay, he's starting out by telling me how much he doesn't believe that his manager knows what he's talking about. And do I really think I'm going to be the exception to that? So when I've got somebody who believes that they can do this job better than me, I'm free. I'm really happy for him. I'll slap him on the back and send him on down the road, because if they think they're going to do it better than a professional manager, then they should be doing it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice
I think that's yeah, that's a nice way of saying it, but there's obviously a certain level of arrogance that's certainly some owners might kind of exude. And ultimately, as you said earlier, I think my optimistic way of looking at that is that it's important to them, a lot of these people. So it's a huge asset. They don't, there's a lot of reasons for them to be a little on edge when it comes to giving that asset over to someone else. But by that same token, certainly people take it too far and, treat people the wrong way. And my logic is, are people acting in good faith or bad faith? And unfortunately, there are bad faith owners out there, and you got to avoid them. So learning that the hard way, probably every property manager has to do it. But, at least if you can spot it early and hit the eject button pretty quickly, you can get back on the right path for sure.
Yep.
All right, awesome. Let's slide into number 3 then. Misunderstanding how important the basic property cleaning is to the long-term health of the property. So allowing a subpar cleaner to stay on months longer than you should have, and it ended up costing you a contract. So, we often, I guess, like the thing that I feel sometimes is that cleaning is just like a checkbox, like, oh, yep, get a cleaner in there, check the box, that's done. But as you're discussing here, the quality of how well that cleaner works is a very variable factor. So tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this was one. It's funny. I remember doing something with a buddy of mine who I won't say what his name is, but he asked me, "Have you ever lost an owner?" And I said, "No, I've never lost an owner." And so we talked about that at a presentation we gave together. And a week later, I lost an owner, and it was because of this cleaning issue. And so, we ended up rectifying that situation. We moved that cleaner out of the way. But then a couple of months later, I got another property because the current property owner was unhappy with their cleaner. And so the only reason they came to us is because the cleaner that we were working with, that was working on an adjacent property, had decided, or the owners had decided they liked what she was doing so much that they brought their business to us simply because of how well the cleaner was doing on a different property. So for me, that was really kind of a light bulb went off, and we've focused a whole lot more on our inspection process, on working with our cleaners, making sure that we really take that part of the job to heart. Because, I mean, if you walk in as a guest to a dirty place, your experience starts on a completely different level. And it's not, you're now in recovery mode as the manager, as opposed to helping the guest have this amazing experience. And so that's something that, been at it 7 or 8 years at that point, where I really realized, okay, this is a huge issue, and we just can't afford to be complacent on that ever.
Yeah, Brooke, I guess, it's one of those things, again, people have to learn, and I'm sure this came up a few times, right? The team on the ground and that professional housekeeper that's walking in that property might be the only person that's seeing it in person in many cases, on your team, whether it's full-time or contractor or something like that. So not understanding the quality, that person leaves behind or how they do the job is something maybe that's come up a few times as well.
Yep. No, I mean, Jed nailed it perfectly. There's nothing more to add than that.
Right on. Okay, then we can slide on over to number 4. So let's head down that path. Not creating or storing repeat communications earlier in the process. So typing and retyping the same emails and communication and answering the same questions over and over again. I think you joke here, Jed, wasting weeks of your own time. So how did you kind of create that efficiency and learn from this kind of this piece?
Yeah, better tools. I mean, when we started being able to store auto responses in different platforms like Verbo, Airbnb, we use Rubru for our guest book system. When we had the ability to start handling those as creating templates and then using that template when somebody asks a question, you pull the template up, you type in a half a sentence, which is their specific question, and it has all the other buffer stuff. Thanks so much for your inquiry. We're really happy to have this opportunity to discuss this with all that junk that is super important in a normal communication, but you end up writing over and over and over again. So even if you're not going to be doing, even if you want to still be able to put some custom content, I guess, in those communications, by creating templates that does most of that communication, you can just answer the one line in that question that's really going to make the guest or whoever's talking to you realize, okay, you are actually talking to me. So that's really important to be able to have those templates set up, and whether it's in email folders, if you're doing it over email, or like I said, those saved message templates in the different OTAs and your messaging platforms, that saves just a ton of time because you're removing 90% of a message. You just recycle that portion of it, and then you answer the one line or two lines that you need to add there. So that helped a ton.
Conrad, I think you showed me this hack. There's in a setting in Apple under shortcuts. You go into settings, and I think it's under shortcuts where you can just create as many little snippets as you want. And I use that every single day. I mean, it could be simple things like my meeting scheduler. It could be entire emails, intro emails. If I pretty much have the same email that I'm writing once or twice, or if I any kind of thing, I'll just use that, and it's amazing how much time that has saved me because you can use it in almost any application, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I'm with you guys 100%. My take on this is that the computer sitting in front of you is a tool. And if you use that tool and maximize the efficiency of that tool, you can be a lot faster too doing this kind of stuff. And like you're saying, Jed, time is money. We don't have time to do things inefficiently when we're a small team and we have to compete with these bigger teams out there. So we have to figure out ways to make ourselves more efficient, and kind of saves headspace too a little bit, kind of that mental bandwidth of typing out the same email over and over again. Someone may scoff and go, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but it is across, like you're describing, Jed, hundreds
totally
of communications.
Yeah, and I think what it does too is by having those little hacks in there and those little, I mean, for us, we talk about booking friction with a guest, right? You want to remove all the obstacles for them getting to your booking platform. For us as operators, it's removing the operational friction because I don't have to remember all of the stuff that I need to say in that email. I can just go grab that email, type out that one extra thing that I need to add as content, and I can send that off in 2 or 3 minutes, as opposed to having to sit down and recompose an email, which is probably going to be 95% regurgitated from the last time I did it. So it helps operators remove those barriers to being quick and efficient and responsive.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, and some people like myself are kind of drawn to this. I would imagine, Jed, having kind of your background and being more like engineering kind of, logical person, you're drawn to that. I think sometimes it's also getting the team to use it as well, like showing them and sitting down with them. Sometimes side by side, I've done this before in the past, or through Zoom or whatever, but, kind of showing them, hey, here's ways that you can actually make this process better. Makes the team actually happier. I think once you can make their lives better. That's what software is supposed to do. Software is not supposed to complicate our experience. It's supposed to actually make us more efficient and, use our time better for sure.
Absolutely.
So I think that actually dovetails perfectly into number 5. Number 5 here, the mistake made, allowing employees to be aimless because you didn't provide structure and guidance in formalized ways. So with training sessions, like we just said a second ago, SOPs, etc. So kind of what was the mistake made here, and how did you get that back on track to provide aim for your employees?
Yeah, one of the things that I think I've made the mistake a few times of saying, well, let's just get into it and we'll figure it out. And, coming from the methodologies that I've had to figure out problems, we've got full kind of training and history using, root cause analysis systems in order to get to why something went off the rails. And I've made the mistake of thinking that my employees and my staff all think the same way that I do. And when I say, we're just going to figure it out, and what I'm thinking of is we're going to actually look at all of the things that happened, or we're going to look at a certain situation and decide based on that, conglomeration of facts, what's the best way to attack this? Well, my employees aren't doing that. My employees are going to kind of look at me and go, what do we do? And so without teaching them how to do that or giving them some guidelines, here's what I need you to do. When you're confronted with this type of thing, it empowers them to act on their own behalf rather than just going, this sounds complicated. I think Jed's going to need to weigh in on this. So part of what I did, I actually stole one of Vintory's great ideas. It's not the first time and it won't be the last. They had an SOP document in Smartsheets that was like a video link to all of their important SOPs. And I recreated that for Kaloa Kai. So we've got a Kaloa Kai knowledge base now, kind of like Vintory has theirs. So that's one area. It's like a repository of every training and every tutorial that I've made. It sits there and it lives there for the staff to be able to come and reference. But what I also did was I got even more specific with, the way we operate is we've got different shifts that we run in. So there'll be a morning reservation shift, an evening reservation shift, an inspection shift in the afternoon, and then we've got maintenance shifts and things like that. So what we did was we actually defined what is supposed to happen in those shifts. What's the point of the shift? What are the responsibilities during that shift? And then what are the tasks that they're supposed to be doing on a regular basis? And then we circulated it throughout the team, and I got everybody's buy off, and I actually had them all sign off on a DocuSign that says, yes, I understand and will do that, so that when I'm on, a reservation shift, I know what I'm supposed to be doing and it's clear. And that's, if it's an AM reservation shift as opposed to a PM, there are different needs and different requirements there. And so everybody now who operates in any of those shifts has a clear understanding of what they're supposed to be doing, what they're supposed to be covering, and, kind of the deliverables in that shift. And that's been really helpful because it's just cleared the decks a lot in terms of, what we're supposed to be doing when, and what we can, what others can count on us doing when we're in that mode, which has been really helpful.
Yeah, luckily I have Randy Bonds, our COO, and he's Mr. SOP, and he set up all these SOPs for us and set up those smart sheets like Jed was talking about. And we actually use an LMS too for onboarding new team members. And we've got a Vintory University. So we use, it's called Tavuti, which is a learning management system based out of Boise, Idaho, which is really, really sweet platform to kind of help out with that.
Yeah. I mean, my sense of this, I think when you're smaller and you don't have that budget for that second person, it's kind of like you said, Jed, you have to be that leader. And I think a lot of people think leadership is like rah, rah, like get everyone all excited. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of time for that, but most of what leadership is, in my experience, is things like this. Like, all right, here's what I need you to do. Here's like some guardrails, so you don't go way off the left or way off the right. Like here's, you can kind of paint within the lines a little bit, but here's some guidelines on how to actually structure it. And in my experience, that's actually what people tend to look for is like, okay, great. Now you're giving me kind of what I need to accomplish, but also giving me a little bit of latitude. So I find some SOPs can be a little bit overwhelming. It's like, click this button, do this exact thing, almost like a robotic type experience. But I think the better ones are like what you've described, like here's how the shift should go. Here's kind of some of your goals, things like that. And then let people figure it out along the way. And then the employee has a goal, but also a little bit of flexibility in getting there for sure.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, let's slide along then. Kind of also on the team note here, hiring, subcontracting / farming out parts of the business that you don't like doing. So things like owner acquisition, marketing, bookkeeping, etc., are crucial to the health of the business, but you kind of at times hated executing upon them and suffered through them until you finally realized you could hire them out. So now you get it done by a professional, and the time and money you save is huge. So how did you kind of make that leap into assigning things out, and what was some of the things that you did sign out other than these pieces here?
Yeah. So our first one, the first one that we did was obviously our owner marketing, and that went to Vintory, and that was an unqualified win, just not only on the LTV to CAC ratio and all that kind of stuff, but also just, it was something that I could do, but it took me a lot of mental space and effort to actually get in the mode to do it and then get it done and then run those campaigns, send out the postcards, all that kind of stuff. And I was only achieving it at probably, I was getting middling results. Like my stuff wasn't great. It didn't look really good. It was okay. And it did the job, and it was better than not doing it at all. But it took me way too much time for the kind of product that I was putting out. So that was an easy one for me to identify. I know this needs to happen, and I know that I'm not going to get better at it because that's not where my strength is. And I know I'm not going to get better because I don't have a passion for executing on this stuff. If I did, that'd be one of the strengths of the business, and something else would be lagging. So for me, it's about identifying what is a deficiency in your business because you don't look forward to doing it. It's always the last thing that you choose to do when you have a stack of things on your plate. So what I've done is kind of find those low hanging fruit and selected those to farm out. And so, even pieces of our accounting system, like getting bookkeeping help, like I mentioned, there were some things that at the end of every month end, I'd just be sitting in my computer for hours, just doing the same repetitive thing over and over again. And I thought I could easily train somebody to do this. Why am I still doing this? And so I hired a bookkeeper, and now the process flows a lot quicker. I'm happy to pay the, $20-25 an hour that I pay for bookkeeping help there. And the processes move a lot quicker because I can take care of the things that I need to be taken care of, and everything else that I don't have to be doing myself, I can move over. And then I just took that and kind of parlayed that into other areas of the business. And those were our first two kind of really big wins, though, in farming out the stuff that you don't need to do.
Yeah, think about it. So, I mean, with Jed, obviously hiring us, he gets 50 growth experts that this is all we do. If you were to replicate that team, it would cost you hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, but for less than the price of a part-time assistant in the Philippines, you know what I mean? You're getting this, a bunch of experts that, this is all we do. You get a team of graphic designers, you get a team of copywriters, you get a team of digital marketing experts, you get, all the experience we have, in this team collectively, that have, this is all we do. I think it becomes super beneficial and makes you much more efficient. I mean, it's just like why I didn't hire a full-time CFO. I have a fractional CFO because I don't necessarily need that. Or same thing, rather than hiring a full-time recruiter and everything that comes with it, we leverage better talent, for a fraction of what I would pay if I had a full-time recruiter. I'm getting tons of leads in the system, and they're leveraging psychometric personality assessments and things like that. So we use that too, even to this day.
Yeah, right on. I think it's like you said, Brooke, it's like, how much of this do you need? And when you only need really someone to be really impactful for 5, 10, 15 hours a month or something like that, then I'm with you. That's the most logical thing to approach it for sure.
And hire experts, right? Hire experts in their field, but that's all they do, rather than you trying to do everything and doing a half-assed job at it. You're better off hiring those experts.
No doubt about it. Well, that perfect segue into number 7. So reaching out past your core competency areas. So the few times in the past, Jed, that you ventured into, at the request of an owner, for example, into new boundaries that are past doing so-called vacation rental management services, interior design, fab, major trade work, etc. Paid the price, wasted time, frustrated homeowner, and just so results. So kind of focusing on that core experience of what vacation rental management actually is. It's complicated enough, right? Just doing that well. Going outside of it can be challenging, I would imagine.
Yeah, this one's pretty clear. Anytime that you're like dreading a request or dreading saying yes to a request because you're like, I don't know how I do that, and I don't know how I'm going to figure that out. That's your sirens going off in your head to say, just don't. What you do in that point? You say, I know somebody, and I'm happy to refer you over to them. And the lines that I kind of draw now is anytime it gets past the point of maintaining what is actually in the property and doing any upgrades or adding anything or majorly changing anything around, I say, tell you what, we're happy to refer you to somebody else, and then I'll work with that person to arrange access to make sure that they know when they can get in, that they have the access that they need, and that's where I'm going to stop. Because that stuff that you're asking me to do, if it's a kitchen remodel or a bathroom remodel, or we had somebody who bought a place that wasn't furnished and then sent us like vision boards of how they wanted it decorated. And then we got there and it was just boxes and boxes of stuff. And I'm like, what did we sign on for? This is crazy. Because she didn't even have a plan. She just had an idea of a plan. And I was like, no, this isn't going to work. And so anytime we get to that point now, I'm like, you know what? We stop at the front door. Anything that you've got to bring in that is going to change the way this is needs to be done by an expert in that field. And I'll make sure they can get in whenever you need to, but we're not the company for that. And I'm very, very happy and I'm very comfortable now just saying, no, we can't do that.
This came up all the time, Conrad, in the series. I mean, it was the chasing shiny objects. And I mean, I think Justin Ford talked about how at one point he had over 30 boat rentals, a baby gear rental division. He was doing grocery provisioning. And he finally realized we could make more income and save time by just adding 2 great property listings. So I think there was like 5 or 6 people that talked about this, chasing all those different things. And yeah, just stick to your core competency.
And to that point around like, making a profit on it. Funny enough, sometimes you refer the work out and you actually make a little bit on that. Oh, I'll give
Yeah,
you 5%, or 10% of the value. So you
exactly.
essentially take on no headache whatsoever. You still actually make a little bit. So it's not a total loss, in the balance sheet necessarily. And yet, as you say, Jay, you can kind of, let it let them handle the piece that they're good at, and then you focus on what you're good at as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of switching gears here then a little bit. This one's kind of a different one, but I think it's a solid one. Not investing into a professional network earlier. So the doors that have opened up since you've been more focused on relationships in the industry have been transformative and would help a lot, maybe to do that a little bit earlier and make that a priority. So what's kind of been your experience? Obviously the management, the business is one thing, but you, Jed, kind of going out into the VRM world there and making friends has been helpful.
Yeah, I mean, what you get when that happens is you get an opportunity to learn not only from the way other people have had wins in ways that you wouldn't naturally approach. So it kind of opens your mind to a potential opportunity, but you also get to watch how people fail. And when you see somebody fail doing something, you can listen to what they're saying and you can think about that. So you're not only learning how to win in ways you didn't know about, but you're also learning how to avoid failures that you might not have seen. So, what I like to think about it is, for me, expanding my network has been, it's almost been like, my world has gotten brighter. Like I can see more opportunities that I couldn't see before. It's like the difference between walking through a cave with a lighter or a single match and then carrying a lantern that lights up the entire thing. If I've got a lantern that I can see the entire inside of the cave, I not only can see the stairs leading out, but I can also see where is there a mine shaft that I didn't realize I was about to step into. And so the more people you can talk to and the more opportunity you have to learn from other people, whether it's, podcasts are great and all of the stuff that you can consume is fine, but actually interacting with people I found is really helpful. So I'd advocate finding a mastermind group, finding a course to take where you can mix with your people. We actually run an accelerator course for that, and I'll plug the book over here that you can see over my right shoulder a little bit. That's what that's all about, is learning how to learn, but you're also learning with other people and making your world bigger. And so you find opportunities you didn't know about, and you learn to look out for pitfalls that you didn't see coming.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the top 10. Obviously, this came up time and time again. It was number 10 that we did in the book here. But yeah, I always I call it my $2,500 takeaway. I feel like every time I network with somebody in the industry, every time I go to a conference, every time I go to a mastermind, I walk away with a $2,500 takeaway. So it is well worth it.
Yeah. And if anything, Brooke, sometimes that's the floor. Sometimes you walk away with an idea. I've walked away with ideas that have made me tens of thousands of dollars,
Oh, yeah.
over, increased contract or tweak this or tweak that or something in your core offering. So that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Again, next one kind of switches gears a little bit. So you wish you had started earlier with kind of boundaries in your personal life. So, maybe at the time you didn't have an after hours overnight call answering service, later added that, allowed you to kind of disengage from work a little bit and have some balance. Obviously this work and, the expectation of the guest and the owner can be demanding. So drawing those lines in the sand a little bit and figuring out ways to still give good service to the homeowner is something you figured out later on. But what were some of those early struggles you had with this topic?
Yeah, I mean, and when you're on a 24/7 property management company, you kind of have to have somebody at least on most of the time. And what I realized is we could have done that earlier. I could have instituted an overnight call service, which we have now. Some just some basic stuff, even if you're not needing to provide 24/7 service. Like I've got a setting on my phone now that at 6 p.m. that sometimes I work through, but most times I don't. It'll just turn off into a different mode, and the way my phone looks will change. Use some of those filters, and it'll say, "Hey, remember, now is time to disengage and pull away from work a little bit, and then go, re-engage with family." So, like I said, those are, like you used the term guardrails earlier. Those are some good guardrails that you can have that kind of, if it's an email coming in after 6 p.m., it's probably not important that it has to be responded to tonight. That can wait until tomorrow morning. You can let certain communications through. Like I've got my staff can still get through to me until, much later than that, but they have to text me. Like I'm not going to see certain guest messages, certain emails, things like that, just because at some point you've got to disengage in order to be able to bring everything when you are on. So if you never unplug, you deplete your battery so much that you're not good for anybody anymore.
Yeah. I like Mike Harrington said, being too available as an owner manager. This is a tough one, as it ultimately your reputation and business on the line. But if you really want to build a sustainable organization for the long haul, letting your team perform and work through issues on their own is a must. Sarah Bradford talked about, thinking as though I had to do it all. First, be a mom to twin baby boys, print the owner checks, answering the phones, answer every email within an hour, and head up every initiative. So, yeah, I mean, we saw this time and time again come up.
Yeah. My view on this is longevity. Like I've seen it in my own life. My dad is someone who definitely burned out, working way too hard and stuff like that. And if anything, he actually would have made more money by disconnecting and being able to do it longer versus getting all burned out and just frustrated, for doing something for some period of time. So my personal view on this is that actually you're going to make more over time because you actually can sustain it. It's not this unsustainable race that you feel like you fall off the treadmill and, smack your head on the side of it. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And ultimately, people might feel if they're listening early on in their career, they need to hustle. There's a little bit of that, but then, when you have that ability to come up for air and, draw some lines, I think that's going to help a lot of people for sure. Let's round us out number 10. And then we got some things at the end that people can kind of follow Jed and his journey and what he has to offer for sure. So we'll get there in just one moment, but I like this one a lot. So number 10, wish you'd learned earlier how to recognize when there was a deficiency in some part of the business. There's so many resources out there to help: tools, programs, software, products, like you said earlier, masterminds, groups, things like that. You spent a lot of time trying to use custom-made solutions to problems that were basically already solved, just didn't know how to find them. So what was kind of your journey in trying that process and then later finding stuff that was actually made for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, being that I came from engineering, I'm, pretty comfortable with building my own tools, but, I found that several times I'd build something and, not just in engineering, but in the business, where I'd build something and then I'd find somebody else has got a tool. And I'm like, man, that looks an awful lot like a really good version of this thing that I made that doesn't really work like I need it to. But they took the same idea. So, one of the things I've kind of gravitated to is this whole concept that, there's really nothing new under the sun. And there are a lot of smart people in the world. And if you've got a good idea that you think, wow, that'd be amazing, somebody's probably thought of it. And if they have, if you're not sure, go search for it. Go find, there's so many great technological tools. I know that that they've put together. Like I've seen a couple recently that have, kind of these big word boards with all of the different vacation rental companies that play in the vacation rental space, different tech companies, hospitality companies. There are so many people out there, so many smart people applying tools to our particular industry now that, there's really no excuse to not know that something exists. So if you think it might be helpful, go out and find it. Or if you're not focused on what the tool is that you need, just say, man, I've got accounting problems, or I've got operations problems, or something like that. And just start searching for how people solve those problems. And you'll find a wealth of information from the community and from, the people out there who provide solutions that you don't have to use a screwdriver as a hammer the whole time. They've got different tools for those things. So, I would encourage people to go look for them and find them, and then call up the people and talk to them. Say, how does this work? Is this really the solution that I think it is? And that whole process takes a lot less time than continuing to use the wrong tool for the job.
Yeah, I chuckle when somebody says they're going to build their own property management software system, and I'm like, man, there's enough out there that are really good, and they've got full teams that you can't come close to replicating it for the price. No, there's not even. It's very, very challenging. Very, very few companies. I mean, look at all the challenges Vacasa had, doing that.
Yeah, right on. Well, awesome, Jed. I mean, this has been great so far, but you mentioned the book earlier. You mentioned the Accelerator. The title of the book actually is Accelerator for Vacation Rental Managers, a practical guide to creating solid foundations for long-term success and growth. Got that whole thing out without stumbling. So
Nice.
People can check out the book on Amazon. Maybe if you're watching this, depending on what format, we'll put a link nearby. If not, go on Amazon and search it. I'm sure you can find it. But tell us a little bit about that. You kind of got in, you wrote this book. Tell us about that program and what you've been doing over there as well.
Yeah, I mean, and Brooke mentioned earlier on that when we started, right when we started with Vintory, the pandemic hit, and so everything slowed down. And I had 13 months where I couldn't do our job in our normal market. So what I started to do was document how we had done our business, how we built it and put it together, so that it could be helpful for other people. And so that effort led to two things: not only the book, which we actually put it in print form, like you said, it's available on Amazon, Kindle Unlimited, all that kind of stuff. But we also built it out into kind of an LMS format that lives on VRMB with Matt Landau. And we actually do and it's like an intensive boot camp where it's a 12-week program where we go through each of the 6 modules of the book in detail. And we give a whole resource library with templates and financial calculators, modelers, things like that. that you go through that with us, where you go through and you study that, you use the resource materials, and then, every other week I'm about to jump off and do another call with our cohort. We go through and we discuss in depth what we've covered over the last module. And it's a really quick study on how to create your business that is financially stable for the long run. That way, as you grow, you're not growing in ways that are going to make your business topple because you haven't put the right foundations in place. So we're currently doing that, and that's we'll have our next session, I think, probably in about 12 weeks.
And if I could give a little shout out for Jed, it's so funny. When I went out there to visit him, I've been in this industry for 15, 16 years now and visited, hundreds and hundreds of vacation rental managers at this point. And when I went out to visit him and I saw the systems and processes and the way he would just manage his properties, even though you only had Jed, 10 properties, when we first met, he had the foundational elements to set up where if he wanted to scale to 500 or 1,000 properties, he could do it because everything was set up in those systems. I've never seen anybody, even, with hundreds of properties more than you, that have those kind of systems set up. So it's super impressive. He thinks of it like a true engineer. And it's the book is fantastic, and the accelerator group he has is just really, really amazing. So if you're in the early stages, you can learn a ton from that accelerator group for sure.
Right on. As you mentioned, Jed, people can find that if they go to the VRMB community link. So again, depending on how you're watching this, we'll make it available. If not, Jed, how could someone reach out to you? What's the best email for people to reach out and learn a little bit more if they want to just contact you directly?
Yep, just info@kaloakai.com.
Perfect. Nice and simple. Anything else, gentlemen, you want to kind of layer in here, or does that put a good wrap on Mr. Jed Stevens and his top 10 mistakes?
I thought it was perfect. Thanks, Jed. Appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys.